Hello, this is Adam with DreamMade Productions. This video is made possible by the very kind donations of viewers like you. Thank you. If you are in a position to help this channel improve quality and grow, please visit my Patreon page at www.patreon.com/DreamMadeProductions, linked below.
It is the 31st century, and mankind is once again at war. The battlefields of the future are dominated by huge robotic war machines known as battlemechs.
Hello, and welcome back to the Arsenal, a series where we look at the weapons, equipment, and technology of the BattleTech universe. Today we, cover a topic that I have been looking forward to, yet dreading at the same time. A piece of equipment that I alluded to way back in episode 10. A unit as controversial as it is legendary. In all honesty, I had intended to do this later, but with recent events, I'm bumping this up. Today, we lift off with the land-air mech. There is an old saying in war that goes something like this: moving from one environment to another often leaves you vulnerable, whether this is something like changing tactics, formations, or leadership, to more literally like moving from one natural environment to another. Whenever there is a change, there is a moment of weakness. Mankind has known this ever since the first warrior stepped off a crude raft into whatever water he was crossing and was slowed by it just enough that his weaker foe was able to overcome him. A loss that would have been a victory had he just been on an open battlefield. Understanding the land-air mech and the reason for its existence is at its core understanding two things. First is mankind's attempts to minimize this transitioning weakness. The second, we will get to that a little later. These first attempts are long and varied, but for ease of people's sanity, and in an attempt to keep my audience awake for once, I will be somewhat brief. The origins of the Lamb can be traced all the way back to the Second Global War on Terra. The nation-states of old Earth had decided to have a throwdown of, for its time, epic proportions twice in about 3 decades. For mankind at the time, this was, like the Secession Wars, just without all the weapons of mass destruction part. Mostly, anyway. My point is that the Second War saw many new technologies invented that tried to solve the problems of the past. Returning to my poor grunt jumping off a boat, then trying to run onto a hostile beach, one of our best comparisons for the Lamb's existence, we can see a step forward. Slapping a ramp on the front of a motorized boat hull did a lot, but it is important to understand this was a minimizing step. It did not remove the transition, just shortened its time, and therefore lessened its effect. A closer comparison to our upcoming Lamb discussion would be the so-called amphibious tanks of the same period. For the time, these things were state-of-the-art. The idea of a full-on battle tank pushing itself from the transport ship up onto the beach, then seamlessly driving up said beach and murder-facing everyone who has not previously fled in terror, was a great idea. The only problem is getting a diesel-guzzling metal box with a lot of holes in it to float was Let's go with challenging. Additional drive systems, floats to help keep the thing from going to the bottom, like, trust me, this thing really wants to do. It was just beyond their time. Something better would come later. But the basic situation was what the Star League faced centuries later. Much like naval landings in the past, planetary landings of the Star League era proceeded much the same way. Heavily armed warships move in, securing the surrounding area, while pounding anyone stupid enough to be outside their bunkers or bomb shelters into red mist. On a good day, smaller craft launched and head to the beaches or landing zones. Back in the day, it was boats, landing craft, hovercraft, and so on. Today, it's dropships and their aerotech escorts. Finally, the dropships land, open the ramp, and just like the Higgins boat centuries before, the mechs start piling out onto the beachhead. There was just one problem: the transition. You see, every mech warrior who has ever had the, let's go with privilege, to experience a contested landing knows the exact feeling I'm about to describe to you. Imagine this. You are strapped into your battle mech, weapons loaded, engine on. It's almost peaceful in space. Then you hit that atmosphere, and all hell breaks loose. You are headed to the surface, and you would like to get there in as big a hurry as you can. But you're a big fan of not smashing into the ground at several times the speed of sound, so you have to slow down first. I don't care what dropship you are on, the damn things creak and rattle every single time. Sometimes you can hear something from pings to clangs to creaking to some jackass Aztec who left his toolbox in the back of your cockpit and it chose right that moment to fall, scaring the absolute bejesus out of you. Not that there's a personal story there or anything. All the while that's going on, you have the comforting and heartwarming knowledge that there are people trying to kill you outside. It's what we in the business call high stress. By the time that big old ship finally comes to a stop, sometimes leaving your stomach 10,000 feet above somewhere, you gotta charge out that boarding ramp, of course, into perfectly sighted positions on exactly where you have to step. Still, even with all the rounds, missiles, laser bolts, bombs, and general malice thrown your way, in addition to the days, weeks, months, hopefully not years, you are going to spend on this rock getting shot at, you are relieved to at least be on the damn ground and able to shoot back. Sometimes with vomiting involved. It depends on exactly where your stomach catches up with you. But I digress. Again, we see weakness here. The transition. All the time getting from space to the ground. Tons and tons of battle mech, almost completely useless against any air attacks that get by the escorting units. What's worse, you have another transition out the damn dropship once you get on the surface. Not helpful. One solution to all this was the drop pod, which is a kind of solution like curing a headache by giving the patient cancer. Drop pods are kind of like mini dropships, except worse in every reasonable way. Instead of being protected by a dropship's thick armor, they throw up some heat paneling, some thrusters, a parachute if they really, really like you, then throw you out into space so you can make your own re-entry. To call these things death traps is an insult to death traps everywhere. Sure, they can work, lower your profile, and for special forces operations, they can be a must. But for normal operations, just no. Another option is the mid-air drop, or hovering deployment. In this, a dropship flies overhead and just drops the mechs out the side. Jump jets work really well for this, and one-time use jump packs can give even non-jump jet equipped mechs the ability to be dropped. Still not a good idea en masse, as evidenced on 2Kid. The other version, the high-speed drop, works slightly better. A small dropship, something like a Leopard, flies over as fast as its little heart can carry it, and they drop you off the sides or out the bottom. A little safer, but who the hell knows where you're going to land, or where your lance mates are going to be, or how you're going to get home. Still not the best idea. Faced with dilemmas like this, the Starleague designers started to come up with ideas. Since even the Starleague can't just teleport stuff, at least not that we know of anyway, they dusted off our old floating tank idea and gave it a whirl. You see, like all things, politics played its part in the LAM development project. The First Lord at the time, Michael Cameron, was facing an age-old problem. Parts of his military just straight up did not like each other. There are always those divisions within armed forces. Army versus Navy. Air jock versus ground pounder. Wheat versus white. Coffee versus, well, anything not coffee. And so he ordered his newly appointed SLDF commander to, well, we don't know exactly, but I imagine it went something like this. It was not long before people were asking, what if? What if a mech could land itself? What if a battle mech could enter an atmosphere, approach and land under its own power, and not be a complete bag of ass while doing so? What if? And so a dream was born. Planners started drawing up ideas for a, well, flying mech. Something that could go from space to air to ground, and like all battle mechs, climb hills or walk underwater as needed. A hybrid craft, so to speak. Several ideas were put forward, all of them bad. But they took the let's go with least bad and moved forward. And because all of this had to be done fairly quickly, there was no time for a completely new design. Several companies took part in the design contest, with Allied Airspace being the first to cross the finish line in 2680 with their Shadowhawk LAM. The idea was simple. Take the Shadowhawk, a rugged, time-tested, generally light design, and have it fold itself up into an aerofighter. A great idea with just one problem. The fucking thing didn't work. Sure, it could transform, but it struggled in almost every way. Even when it didn't crash, the thing flew more like a brick than an agile fighter. And although none of these flaws were what did in the Shadowhawk LAM, multiple crashes the SLDF commander's forced pet project could withstand. Multiple public crashes, not so much. Ally would continue to fine-tune the design, putting out a more refined X2 version that kinda, sorta, but not really worked. From what little remains of the records, it looked more promising, but More promising than a fuel-guzzling, occasionally flying anvil is not a high bar to cross. In the middle of this debacle, LexaTech Industries finished their entry almost a decade later, in 2688. With the extra time of Allied's failure, they redesigned their Stinger light mech almost from the ground up. The Stinger Lamb would set the performance standards, such as it was, for all land-air mechs to follow. Unlike the Shadowhawk Lamb, this Stinger Lamb, well, worked. It could fly in aerotech mode, and had performance at least better than a brick anyway. Its battle mech mode was comparable to other light mechs' designs. Unlike the Shadowhawk Lamb, which would require a landing to change modes, the Stinger Lamb could do so in flight. It was more dangerous, but it could be done. Additionally, an in-between mode was also designed and programmed into the mech's complex control systems. With arms, legs, and wings deployed, the mech could enjoy some of the benefits of both a mech and an airborne combatant. This trinomial configuration became the standard for all LAM projects to follow. Unknown to LexaTech at the time was that the Harvard company had much the same idea. In 2690, just 2 years after the Stinger Lamb awed audiences by not crashing, the Wasp Lamb wowed them again. This new offering featured faster and arguably safer conversions, as well as a designed-in bomb bay, allowing the Wasp Lamb to be much more effective in close air support roles. The Wasp Lamb would also see more development than the Stinger Lamb, with 5 different variants, as well as a much longer service life after the fall of the Star League for reasons we'll get into. Finally, Allied returned with a new old idea. Having failed with the X2 and unable to overcome the weight issues plaguing their design Shadowhawk idea, their alternate team instead took the time to redesign the Phoenix Hawk. The result? Well, of all the lambs, the Phoenix Hawk Lamb was perhaps the best design. Dropping different versions of the design in the 2690s. While not as fast converting as the Wasp Lamb, its conversion equipment was, well, let's go with as reliable as physically transforming a 50-ton walking or flying or falling Deathbot at high speed could be. With these 3 designs complete, and while in very limited but also very real production, the door stood wide open for more designs. These 3, let's go with successful attempts, set the formula for companies that wanted to follow. A fad started to catch on. A very niche fad, but a fad nonetheless. Who could take a mech and redesign it into a lamb? We know of at least 2 attempts, but there were likely many, many more. Brigadier Corporation tried to rework their successful but not well-liked Scorpion quad mech design into a lamb version. Because a spider-looking thing isn't creepy enough, let's put wings on the damn thing. With testing prototypes completed by 2690, projections looked good. Performance would meet or exceed the Stinger Lamb. Additionally, the redesign found and fixed the Scorpion's notoriously bad drive system, so you could ride the grounded Scorpion Lamb without having your teeth fillings vibrated out of your head. Brigadier had high hopes for the Scorpion Lamb. But, like the Shadowhawk Lamb, there was a problem. The thing didn't work. Time after time, the unique quad-leg conversion equipment just failed. It failed to initiate, or failed to reach its next conversion state. Losing one of its prototypes in a crash, Brigadier decided it did not want to share Allied's reputation for mostest, biggest, most expensive lawn dart manufacturer in the galaxy. They buried the project along with its remaining prototype in a bunker on his Festus 2. Forgetting the whole thing proved to be a very fortunate move. In 3065, Defiance Industries uncovered the bunker, finding the research team's notes along with the almost 400-year-old prototype. Defiance would spend years working on getting the thing to work, but in the end gave up just like Brigadier had. But the improved ground motive system would be incorporated into future Scorpion models, much to the disappointment of dentists galaxy-wide. The other example we know of was an attempt to convert the SLDF Champion battle mech. Now, this does not sound as silly as it seems. Have you seen a Champion? The thing looks like an airplane already, so you can see where Bergen Industries was coming from. They removed all they could really get away with from the basic design, making room for the conversion equipment. The problem was, no one had designed conversion equipment for such a heavy design. Further, jump thrusters large enough were not available by the time the prototype was slated for testing. To get around this, Bergen cut corners. They beefed up existing conversion equipment designs without fully testing the changes first. Next, they used shuttle-class lift nozzles as jump thrusters. During testing, surprisingly, everything went smoothly. The mech could jump, and its conversion went smoothly. The issue came later, when maintenance pulled the thing apart and found the mech was holding itself together by weld seams. And old bubble gum. Minus the gum. The waist and hip assemblies were so bad, a slightly harder landing, or a particularly aggressive fart from the pilot would have resulted in the mech disassembling itself a few seconds earlier. While not as catastrophic as other LAM projects, parts of the maintenance report were leaked. Conversion gear falling apart after a single test, jury-rigged shuttle parts where jump thrusters should be. Yeah, it was something of a scandal. Stock prices plummeted faster than those Shadowhawk lambs, and without significant progress being made, Bergen canceled the project. A bonus mention here is Martinson Armament's Screamer Lamb. When faced with the absolute juggernaut of the SLDF war machine returning, Stefan Amaris reacted as so many power-hungry madmen do. They started looking for a magical solution to this problem. The age-old mythical wonder weapons were ordered, and Martinson was arm-twisted into designing the ultimate land-air mech, an advanced weapon system so powerful all would fall before it. Fortunately, the engineering team at Martinson were fierce loyalists. They engineered what looked to be a competent LAM design, but leaked all the design documents as well as manufacturing instructions to the approaching SLDF. General Kerensky's reaction was not recorded, but he lacked the manufacturing facilities to copy the design even if he wanted to. In the end, only a single prototype was produced in 2777. During the invasion of Terra, it was jumped by SLDF fighters. It crashed when trying to convert after taking heavy damage. Perhaps not surprising, as the last known SLDF-designed LAM, the Screamer had the most advanced systems. But with all the details locked away in clan archives, we are unlikely to see its return anytime soon. I was tempted to go over variants and weapon loadouts, but I figured this talk would be long enough as it was. I'll leave such breakdowns to Tex, in a way only the professor's weapons-grade autism can do justice to the topic. So after all this, how does a LAM work? And why are they such ass machines? Well, let me tell you. As I mentioned, the LAM idea on its surface is not an unreasonable one. Being able to deliver yourself to the battlefield would have many advantages. It's the limits on technology, mind you, Starlead technology that was the problem. Making a walking tank, well, fly is hard. Jump jets, which we have already looked at, was in its day a crazy enough idea. Still, sustained, reliable flight in a form that was useful on the battlefield, very difficult, but doable after a fashion. While there were undoubtedly completely new LAM designs on the drawing board, the relative success of the Stinger, Wasp, and Phoenix Hawk redesigns probably killed those completely new designs. Let's take a look at your generic LAM. Whether we are talking about the SLDF designs, the Word of Blake monstrosities, or whatever nonsense someone thought up. And forget about the Shadowhawk LAM design, since it worked differently and frankly was more ass than I feel like dealing with right now. The first production runs of LAM designs were distinct from their standard battle mech step siblings, but it was not long before all the manufacturers made an effort to make the LAM versions as visually and even on sensors as much like the standard designs as possible. So visually, they will look almost exactly alike. But it's what's underneath that matters. You see, all battle mechs are capable of a pretty good range of movement. Otherwise, they would not be the kings of the battlefield they are. Any old tank can carry a gun into combat. A mech can really move, dodge, stand, kneel, even climb and crawl. With a little more coaxing, mechs are capable of some pretty radical self-pretzeling. Take the quick draw. Some models can flip arms. I mean, really flip arms. Not as well as something like a rifleman, but it can still be a shock the first time you see one of those models do it. Now, take that to an extreme. LAMs use what they call conversion equipment. This is a catch-all term that includes many technologies. Not just the ability to fold up limbs and fold out wings, but also redirect power, switch targeting systems and control system modules, convert standard fusion engine output to thrust output, and all the ductwork that takes. Of course, all that ductwork has to be mobile within the mech, since it has to move out of the way when ground components are needed, all the while avoiding wires and ammo feed lines for weapon systems. Think the insides of a normal battle mech is a nightmare? You ain't seen nothing yet. All this complexity adds failure points, both internally and externally. Damage to a component almost irrelevant to a standard battle mech can be crippling to a LAM, whether that is battle damage or just some asshole rock flinging up into the wrong place. Sliding components around can easily lead to your transforming death machine being stuck in whatever configuration it's in. Or worse. What's more, these systems were all designed to very precise standards. They all have to slide around each other perfectly. So you can't just change things. Doing things like, I don't know, making its armor bulkier or its engine compartment larger just can't be done. Advanced systems like XL engines, FF armor, and Indo-steel chassis construction do exactly that. Non-Omni-Mech's weapons bays are inflexible enough as it is, and although these bays in a LAM are not as restrictive as the conversion areas, let's just say there is a good reason most LAMs had very few variants. Your next problem was training. Mech warriors, good mech warriors, train for years before their first battle. The same for aerotech pilots. And while some skills are transferable, many are not. You are left with two bad choices. Either miss out on life-saving training in both fields, or install a dual cockpit and hope the mech warrior and aerotech pilot can work together in a seamless, almost inhuman way, all the while probably not liking each other very much. Now, I can almost hear what people are going to say. Lambs are dumb. They suck. Glad they are gone. Not to mention the clanners' almost obsessive hate for the things. I know I have spent the past half hour trash talking lambs. You might think I hate the things. Well, I can say with certainty I don't. They are wonderful ideas that just haven't been figured completely out yet, and are often very misused on the battlefield. Critics will point out their lackluster performance, both as a mech and an aerotech fighter, and they are technically right about that. Take it from me, I would know. You see, I have been one of the very few fortunate enough to actually fly one of these things. I can't go into detail, but it was not in combat, and I'm a mech warrior, not an aerotech pilot. I can fly some stuff. I'm talking some aircraft, a VTOL if I need to. Think, take off, fly around some, and land. On a nice sunny day. It's a useful skill. Because of reasons I can't get into, I was offered the chance to take out a Phoenix Hawk Lamb. I've piloted Phoenix Hawks before. There were some extra controls, and it felt a little sluggish, but man, after a few minutes of adjusting, I could do almost anything I could do in my trusty old Phoenix Hawk. Switching to aeromech mode was crazy. Wings cranking out, the mech's head lowering into a nose cone, and hunched over view. Man, skimming across the ground was a new feeling. Like improved jump jets with a partial wing, but better. Finally, I got to take her up and fly around. Now, I did this separately. No running jump into aeromech mode to flying up for me. No. I took her to an airfield, transformed on the ground, taxied, and runwayed up. I was surprised for all the stories of lambs handling like flying bricks. She was fairly simple to fly. I power climbed and could roll and loop, did some pretty hard turns, and I was able to stay with the conventional fighter that was up there with me. Though, keep in mind, this was no dogfight and I'm no combat pilot. I didn't take her into space, but I landed her in aeromech mode before converting back to battlemech mode. Man, if I had to make planetfall again, I'd rather be in one of these babies. At least until I was really planetside anyway. And here comes my opinion. The Lamb is disliked because it is misused. Since the machines had to compete with the advanced technology of the Star League, particularly in the chaos of the Great War, then it was thrown into the meat grinders of the Secession Wars to be finished off by advanced clan mechs. We see a lot of losses on the Lamb scorecard. I contest this is because the Lamb is misused and has been almost since its inception. The Lamb is not about being the best. It is about being good enough for a few minutes. A comparable aerotech fighter will always have an advantage over a Lamb. The same as for any battle mech in its same class. Lambs on the battlefield are meant to be a stopgap, a force that can plug a hole. They can screen with aerotech assets while the invasion force is breaking atmosphere, then convert and land with the dropship, causing chaos on the defenders that thought they would have time to side in their attacks on the dismounting battle mechs. Instead, they are being bombed, strafed, and now facing approaching mech forces engaging them. It's not about using the Phoenix Hawk Lamb to take down that Atlas. That's just foolish. It's about the Phoenix Hawk Lamb keeping the Atlas from lining up its AC-20 on the dropship's ramp for just a second or two. Just long enough for your Atlas to hit the dirt. It's about intercepting that lone bomber that got through the escorting fighters and forcing him to go evasive instead of dropping the pain on your landing dropship. It's not about being the best. It's about being good enough for just long enough. And in this, lambs excel. But even this, in my opinion, is not what the lamb is best at. Marshal Kenny Graham, former commander of the 41st Avalon Hussars, penned a hypothetical battle plan for lamb-equipped units long after their supposed extinction. In his book, Strategic Victory Through the Tactical Use of the Land-Air Mech, the Marshal proposed that the lamb was not a tactical weapon of war, but a strategic disruption tool. Very long story short, he proposed using small units of lambs to attack infrastructure targets far behind enemy lines, then using the lamb's unique abilities to evade counterattacks. Cornering a battle mech can be hard enough, let alone one that can fly, or if all else fails, burn for orbit. A single lamb properly utilized would require a full company of enemy units to attempt to engage it. Their presence would also force enemy commanders to garrison every potential target against both air and mech assault. A flatbed with some AA bolted on the back may deter an air raid, but a mech would not be threatened. Similarly, that minefield really isn't going to matter when the lamb starts its bombing run. I am of the opinion that the career of a lamb pilot should be the most boring job imaginable, because if your target is capable of shooting back, you have already messed up. In these niche roles, the lamb excels. People often equate raw battlefield capability with success. This is not always the case. Take this, for example, the humble Swiss Army knife, and its successor, the multi-tool. Is this thing the best combat knife? No, certainly not. Is it the best screwdriver or can opener? No. What it can do is be any of those things without having to carry around a tote bag of stuff. It's light, portable, and it can get the job done in an emergency. In the end, the lambs were a high-tech solution to an age-old problem. History looks back at the lamb with a mix of wonder and distaste. But I say that distaste is misplaced. What the lamb was designed to do, it does well, especially for the first generation of the technology. The failed Shadowhawk experiment led directly to 3 supposedly lackluster yet still successful machines. Generation 2 was in testing and on the drawing boards with the Champion and Scorpion lambs, with the first completely purpose-built lamb showing great promise, despite its tainted origins. As with so much, the lamb did not fare well in the secession wars that followed. Allied lamb plant was a prime target for nuclear strikes in the early days of the First Secession War. Still, as advanced as lambs were, they were in a way remarkably simple, powered by standard engines, built with standard structure and armor, even sharing many parts with their earthbound cousins. By the clan invasion, only a single plant with the proper tooling remained in the whole inner sphere capable of making any replacement parts. The Lexitech Wasp lamb plant on Iris, it had kept the dwindling number of Wasp lambs flyable for centuries, as well as the occasional part that could be used in a Stinger or Phoenix Hawk lamb. Clan Novacat ended that when they destroyed the plant in 3050. As the lamb, already a kind of legend, faded more from popular memory, well, history repeated. As madmen bent on subjugating the galaxy to their way of life dreamed of flying mech superweapons. We will go into that story at some point in the future. Please let me know what you think of the lamb. How do you use them? And what do you think of Marshall Kenny Graham's insights into the subject? Let me know below. And as always, I hope you enjoy the battle reps that are to come.
We are poor little lambs who have lost our way. Ba, ba, ba.
Hello, this is Adam with Dream Made Productions. Thank you for watching my content. It really means a lot that you have given me the chance to entertain you. If you would like to support the channel, please visit my Patreon at patreon.com/DreamMadeProductions, linked below. Also below is a link for PayPal, or links if you would like to send crypto, if that's more your thing. Please know any amount that you give will be cherished and used to upgrade equipment and improve the channel. You can also help the channel by subscribing, turning on notifications, liking, commenting, and sharing my channel with anyone you think might be interested. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you enjoy the battle reps that are to come.